Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Kim, I think Kate's right before the break that there are no risk-free options here for the Democrats, but the question is what looks like the best risk for them. They can stick with Joe Biden, who is down in the polls, has been down in the polls for some time now, and we'll have to wait and see after this debate performance whether he sinks further. They can have a coronation to elevate Vice President Kamala Harris. We've discussed some of the downsides of that, or they can have an open convention. And you're hearing some talk in Democratic circles about how that would open the door to chaos. I don't know that I buy that. I think that it would be the biggest political event in a long, long time. All of the country would be glued to it. And what could emerge from that is somebody like one of these governors are relatively untested on a national stage. But it would shake up the presidential election like nothing else. It would be a brand new race. And by the way, Donald Trump, I think, does not want that to happen. It seems pretty clear, Kim, at least to me, that he would prefer to continue running against 81-year-old Joe Biden all the way to November.
Well, we're talking about three different things. What would be best for the country? What would be best for Donald Trump? What would be best for the Democratic Party? What would be best for the country, I agree, would be a nominee other than Joe Biden, just because I think people are legitimately worried about his capacity to handle another 4 years. And if, something were to happen, I don't know, Donald Trump still has the ability to mess this up. I think there's some real risks of putting him back in office. Donald Trump obviously sees the advantage of keeping Joe Biden on the ticket, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the next weeks he is coming out talking about how he's the most fearsome candidate Democrats could field because he wants to encourage the White House to maintain their bid. The Democratic Party, here's where things get really sticky. I mean, I totally agree with you, Kyle. What would be best for the Democratic Party is a fresh start, okay? Because what we've really got here is 8 years of an obsession with Donald Trump among the media and Democrats that has papered over some real problems in the Democratic Party. And one of those, though, is what I think argues against getting the outcome that you suggested, which is that the smartest thing is for them to potentially go to a younger candidate. By the way, a Republican state like a Kentucky or a swing state like Pennsylvania. You mentioned Josh Shapiro, some younger governor who says, I have a totally different style than Joe Biden. I have different ideas. Look how I have governed here in my area. Fresh start. Because let's not forget, part of the problem, what's on the ballot here too, is 4 years of failed progressive policies, which have put the country in a very bad mood. So yeah, fresh start. But this party is never going to do that, because one of the things that happened over the last 8 years has been a takeover at the top and all the influential positions of a progressive wing that isn't going to tolerate a candidate like that, in my mind. So you get all those delegates on the floor. They are party-based activists. That's not going to be palatable to a lot of them. A Gavin Newsom, yes, maybe. Gretchen Whitmer. But I think Kate makes a valid point that it's not clear that those kind of Democrats, Gavin Newsom from such a blue state, can translate to swing states, or Whitmer. And then you have the unvetted problem. I just think what you see here at the moment is this vast pileup of all these bad decisions that Democrats have made over the years, from renominating Joe Biden and helping him paper over his problems, to waving along Kamala Harris as vice president, to this dramatic shift to progressive politics that it's very hard to undo with one convention.
Kim mentioned Donald Trump's ability to still mess this up. And so it does seem strange to me that while this Biden implosion is taking place, President Trump this week decided that he was going to retweet or retruth on his social media site a post saying that Liz Cheney is guilty of treason. Retruth if you want televised military tribunals. I think President Trump did himself great favors in that debate by being relatively restrained, but amazing while his opponent is busy making all of these mistakes, he can't stay out of his own political way. And then there's a third candidate that is on the ballot in many states. That is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And let's save a mention for him. Recently, a Vanity Affair article came out with all sorts of accusations against him. One of them is that RFK in the late 1990s groped a babysitter in his home who was working for him. Asked about this allegation on a podcast, he said, "I am not a church boy. I had a very, very rambunctious youth." He said, "I have so many skeletons in my closet. If they could all vote, I could run for king of the world." The Vanity Fair article also had a photo of him eating what it said was a dog on a trip to South Asia. He is now saying that it was in Patagonia and it was a goat. Here he is in an interview with Chris Cuomo saying that he'd eat virtually anything except for three things. Quote, "I wouldn't eat a human, I wouldn't eat a monkey, and I wouldn't eat a dog. I think I'd eat anything else," unquote. And so, Kate, what is the Winston Churchill line that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others? Heading into November, these are your choices, America.
Yes, well, thank you for walking the listeners through all that. I do think it's hard to believe as Americans express so much dissatisfaction with the two major party candidates. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was not exactly, I think, what they had in mind when they complained about their existing options. I think one of the more interesting questions you asked, too, is about Trump and his propensity to make his own errors while his opponent is busy making mistakes. I do think that's an important point here, that Biden looks astonishingly weak, and it will be very hard for him to recover the perception that he's up for 4 more years of this job. But Trump can look to independent and suburban voters who will have a lot of influence on the election as a gamble. You know, one concrete example of that I might use is from last week's debate. Trump was talking very cogently about how America's withdrawal from Afghanistan really made us look weak on the world stage and encouraged Putin to invade Ukraine. But then he had very little to add on what he would do about the Ukraine war now that it's started, other than he'll end it before he comes into office. And no one seriously believes this. So he also has, in addition to these really undisciplined, ridiculous attacks on Liz Cheney, of all people, who's no longer a major figure in the Republican Party, voters don't really know what to expect for him on some really important issues facing the country. And so there is a possibility that he's not just going to ride Joe Biden's weakness back into the White House. And I do think that's an important theme here as he looks at Biden's own collapse here and tries to make the most of it.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back later this week with another edition of Potomac Watch.